All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is the weekly Coaches Corner, and I'm your host, Dustin Distefano, CEO of A Place at Home. Usually it's four of us, myself and our coaches, Tiffany Dutcher, Shane Thompson, and Jennifer Axelrod. But this week, we brought on a special guest, Greg Bean with Paradigm, in which A Place at Home has a very strong relationship with, I would like to imagine, right, Greg?
Absolutely.
And all of our owners use them for VA credentialing, third-party credentialing, going through those processes, and then afterwards helping with billing, receivables, and reading their dashboard and really giving us the information that we need and help that we need to streamline our billing process. So a big shout out to Paradigm, me and Yussi, our good buddy. What's Yussi's position? Daniel's the owner, right? And
Yossi's our COO. He's our chief operating officer. Yeah.
Yep. Well, Greg, why don't you explain your position with them and give a little background a little history about yourself? Let's jump right into there so they know who's talking to them.
Yeah, so my name is Greg Bean. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Paradigm Senior Services. And what I do at Paradigm is actually genuinely help home care companies grow. My entire purpose is to actually help you understand third-party payers, how to leverage those payers back into your platform, how to understand what the benefits and pieces and parts of third-party payers are, and then how to use that to grow your business. So a little bit about myself. So, I started out as a hospital corpsman in the United States Navy at a ripe old age of 17 because I didn't want to be a cowboy in Idaho anymore. So I ran away and joined the Navy. After that, I went back, got my degree in nursing, spent about 10 years doing emergency nursing and critical care nursing. And then a friend of mine said, hey, let's start a home care company. Little did I know that that was going to be the hardest job I ever had in my entire life. So did that for several years, passed on from there, opened another, and then went to work for Beato Home Health and home care and spent about 7 years with them, and then went over to a company called PSA Healthcare as a regional vice president for them, doing skilled pediatric hourly care. Worked across multiple states as a regional director and in positions with them, and then moved over to one of the franchise networks for a few years, and then now here I am at Paradigm helping all of you to grow your business.
Awesome. And you are a wealth of knowledge, sir, and I've heard you speak numerous times. You always are a regular attendee at our annual conference, and we always are happy to have you speak in front of everybody. So we're going to bring it out today to a live audience, and let's jump in. We're going to talk about third parties. A lot of things have changed in the last 10 to 12 years. Third parties 10 years, 12 years ago when I got into home care wasn't a major thing. I mean, you had Medicaid waiver programs that were around, and maybe some grants or respite grants through like associations like the Alzheimer's Association and such, but there just wasn't a lot of third-party payers. But today you have the evolution of better Medicaid waiver plans, Medicare Advantage plans, and the VA community care plans, which are very good right now. And I want to start there at topic number one, the VA community care program. Where do you see it today? Let's give a little history. I mean, elaborate on what I said maybe 5 years ago and where it's evolved today and where you see that being in 5 years.
So 5 years ago, every single home care company had to contract individually with each and every VA regional medical center. So if you were in Omaha, Nebraska, you had to get a contract with your local VA hospital, and they dictated who was in network, what was going on, how they were going on. They dictated the rates to you. It was all set up and it went. And so with 250 VA hospitals across the country, give or take a few, you had 250 different reimbursement rates and policies and procedures and how they did billing, and the challenges associated with that were, you'd submit all of your bills over to the local hospital. They'd only take them once a month. They would shoot it off to Dallas to process, or a regional billing center. And then we had all of these challenges coming back, and people didn't get paid consistently, and they were sometimes 180 days out, or if you had a single error on a bill, they would deny the entire billing cycle, and then they would come back and say you weren't timely, and it was kind of a nightmare all the way around. And so some people did it incredibly well, but typically it was a challenging payer source And the veterans were those that weren't getting the service they needed. It wasn't necessarily agencies, but it was the bureaucracy of the VA which caused challenges. So about 5 years ago, administratively, they moved over to the Community Care Network, which was then contracted through Optum in the eastern part of the country and TriWest in the western part of the country. With that being said, they then moved all of the credentialing and enrollment and who could be in network and pushing them into the VA's network into those two bodies, which then maintained that piece and then did all of the financial reimbursement and paying and contracting back for the agencies. So all the bills ran through a managed platform. What did that do for us? It streamlined billing. It made billing, allowed us to automate the billing processes. It allowed us to automate billing back through these networks, simplifying billing, and people consistently get paid on time. If you're in the West with TriWest, it's about a 2-week revenue cycle. And if you're in the East in Optum, it's about a week payer cycle. So even though they're two separate entities, we see consistently being paid on time, being paid full amounts, paid without error. As long as you follow your authorization and you bill correctly, you get paid timely. So that was incredibly simple. And then a couple of years ago, our current administration started pushing things back into more of a consumer-driven model again, pushing more for veteran-directed care and family caregiver programs and pushing a little bit away from community care network, allowing VA hospitals to have a lot more anonymity again and being able to make decisions on their own again and not following the rules per se. So we have each and every one deciding what hours they're going to give, how much their percentages are, how they're going to follow authorization, so on and so forth. And some more inconsistencies falling back under that. So you say, now, how does that affect us moving forward into 2025 and moving forward? I think we will see a much bigger push under mandates and things going on. An example would be the Elizabeth Dole Act, which just passed the House of Representatives on Monday. It had passed the House prior, but there were a lot of budgetary issues with it, and the Senate kicked it back and said they weren't even going to vote on it. I think that the leaderships got together, and I'll explain a little bit about what's in the Dole Act and why it affects us here in a moment, but basically the two houses got together, the two parties got together, and they decided it was a good bill overall, that the finances could work, and they pushed it through, and the House passed it, and I genuinely believe it'll pass the Senate, at which point in time we'll get it codified into law. Now, what is important to you and I and the agencies out there and people that might be listening? The Elizabeth Dole Act codifies the Homemaker Home Health Aid and Respite Program into law. So right now, what happens with the community care network hours and so on is each VA hospital decides how much of a budget they want to place into that program and how much they want to pay back into home care in that program. And if they don't want to give more than 6 hours a week, that's all they budget within their platform. If they want to give 9 or 12 or 16, it's not standardized or made to be standardized across the country. Even though the VA actually has a mandated assessment tool in place, which forces them to utilize it to tell us how many hours they're supposed to do, each hospital still runs under their own platform. With the codifying of this program into law, it mandates that they fund Homemaker Home Health Aid and Respite Services into each hospital as a part of the availability of caregivers. And for veterans, I should say. So now it creates that. So now not only do they have to fund it, they have to fund it around their standardization of hours.
So what you're saying is they're going to have to, they have to use that tool, and now they can go. I know a lot of people who would be listening to this say the VA only gives 12 to 16 hours, and home care providers are stuck going in there and saying this guy needs 40 to 60 hours to have an actual impact. You're saying that that's going to become more standardized now? More consistent, correct. I guess you'd say.
Correct. Well, and the second piece of this legislation that I think is incredibly important is right now, from a funding standpoint, the VA only says that you can pay up to 65% maximum of placement costs to a veteran in a home care space. Meaning, if the veteran's average cost per day for a nursing home was $255 a day on an annualized basis, the VA is only mandated to fund 65% of that at max.
So let's do that quick math here. So you said 250 a day. I got my calculator right here. Times 50, or it's 365. So that's 91,250. But you're saying they would be mandated to pay 65% of that.
That's all they are mandated right now, is to do 65% of that.
So about 60,000 a year.
Correct.
For care.
Okay. Correct. But with Dole Act passing, that legislation says that the veteran can receive 100% of placement cost to maintain independence and stay at home.
So now let's pause there and show what that equals. So that was it was 250 a day. Is that an actual number, or is that like a hypothetical number that you're saying?
That's when I was in Washington, D.C. last year. That's what the VA said they're paying on an average cost per day for a veteran placement on a national average.
So that means here on one veteran at 91,250 as a placement. Now they can use 100% of that. I'm trying to just make this simple. You're doing great, but I'm a math person.
That's okay. That's good. No, that's good.
So you got $91,250 budget per veteran to utilize. They get 100% of that now. Our average rate at a place at home is $35 an hour. So let's divide that by 35. And I know the VA rates are different, but they're bound. They're 35, let's just say. So that gives them 2,607 hours a year. Divide that by 52. And now they can get around 50 hours a week if they're at that average, roughly.
To maintain independence and stay out of a nursing home or facility cost. Absolutely.
Where if we take 65% of that, which is currently, they're getting 32. Now, my question to you is, I'll just use Jacksonville, Florida. I know you're down in Florida. They don't give more than 16. So why do you, and you're saying that's on an individual hospital policy wise, why do you think hospitals make that choice? I mean, it's not like they're benefiting from it. There's no CEO that's maximizing their profit center. It's a government body, correct?
Right. So what happens right now is there's an allocated amount of money for every single veteran that goes to the hospital on an annualized basis. And by the way, that's a really big number.
Sure.
But then they take that number and then that's what they use to manage their healthcare system across the VA. And when you look under numbers, the VA currently literally spends about 65% of the veteran's budget on salaries. So if the veteran's number per veteran per year on an annualized basis is out there at about $400,000, give or take a little bit,
65% of it's going
that
to
goes back into VA salaries. They're only taking a smaller portion, but even within the smaller portion of that, that's what they're paying for your cath lab and your emergency department and all the rest of those pieces and parts. And so the hospitals have never been mandated by law to provide home care as an option. So literally the hospital in Jacksonville can say, oh, look, we think that home care reduces our rehospitalizations. We think it's a great opportunity. We think it helps our veterans to mandate independence and stay at home and not get rehospitalized. So we think it's a great platform. So we're going to fund it at 16 hours. Whereas you have another hospital that says, look, I'd rather keep them independent if it takes me 56 hours a week to keep them independent at home. It's still a better opportunity than placing them or the cost of placement and so on, depending where they are. But each hospital places into their budget what that is. Great example. We heard back from people in West Virginia, or if you were in Oregon or Washington State today, if you're in and around the Seattle area, one of the big complaints there is they're saying that their hospital has a 10 to 12 month wait to get somebody on services because they don't have any more budget. They won't even if a veteran has orders and is qualified and has benefit, their budget is capped out and they won't allow until somebody comes off a service, they won't put another one on because their budget's capped out.
Now the budget, though, is federal, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. They had I think last time I listened to you speak, there's about a $2 to $3 billion budget. Is that right? Like a $2 billion budget to home and community-based services.
Well, within the VA's health system, it's closer to a $9 billion budget annualized. But,
okay.
And then, with that being said, each hospital itself is kind of like its own individual managed care network, and they decide within that what programs they want to fund or put money into or not put money into. And if they want to put money into home care, they can. If they don't want to put money into home care, if they don't even want to offer the benefits to their veterans, it falls on them to decide how much and when they want to do it, because it's not law.
And the Elizabeth Dole Act helps that.
It creates it into law, and it forces the VA to actually fund this program and create guidelines for which they have to actually provide services and allow up for 100% of placement costs to be placed into home care to maintain independence and stay at home. So now that veteran has an opportunity to increase those dollars and monies and amounts to keep them independent at home back to this much larger number.
No, I think that's great. Thanks for explaining that. Now, let me ask you this. Are there going to be penalties to VA hospitals that prevent people from getting it, like a Seattle?
I think that's going to be something that, as this comes into play, as we have this opportunity, I think it's going to be vitally important for our home care companies and our advocates out there in the world and our veteran advocates out there in the world to make sure that we're advocating and educating and having people understand what it is, and making sure that congressional leaders understand what it is so that they can force back through, because all this is still overseen by your a much larger group like your veterans committee and in congressional committees, who then go back to the VA and say, you're not following your rules. They still have oversight to that. So we have a new administration coming in and a new person overseeing the VA health system, or the VA system in general, in Mr. Collins. So the question will be, do we have the ability to reach out to him and say, Doug Collins, look, you're not following the rules on a national level, and here's 5,600 and something examples of that. When I look at the population base receiving home care in the VA system, we have between 16 and 17 million veterans in this country, and we're providing home care benefits to 170,000.
How many?
170,000.
So 10%, maybe.
Give or take a little bit, 1%.
1%.
1%.
Yeah, 1%.
1% of our veteran population. And if you took it to the veteran population that's over 65 years old, which is about half of that number, which is actually closer to 10 million actually, you're still only looking at less than 2% of the veteran population over the age of 65 is receiving a home care benefit. And if you looked at our national average of people in that same age group needing care and assistance and needing things at home, it's much larger need within that environment than what the VA is actually providing back to its participants.
So let me take this using that. What can agencies do to get obviously the VA is not big on advertising what is offered to veterans. So agencies typically have to be the ones that advocate for them on the behalf. Well, right. First question though, let me take a step back. You said 1%. Right, you said, would you say 15 million, but 170,000?
16.5 million,
and then 170,000 use it.
Right.
So all right,
so just over 1 point something percent. Yes.
Now let me ask you, what do you think the percentage should be if we were advertised, if they were offering the service out through the VA, through the doctors, through the community care? What do you think percentage of that 16 million would actually be getting care? What I'm trying to get at is how many people need care right now that aren't getting it.
So I speak to communities and organizations and community centers and senior centers and so on a weekly, monthly basis, and I've never walked into one yet that didn't have somebody that didn't know about these programs that needs help and assistance. Should it be closer to 10% of that veteran population? Probably. Do I have a number that I would put on it that I would say, oh gosh, I have studies that could show that? I'm just talking off my head. I'm just saying, when I speak to veteran populations, it's a significantly larger population base of need than what are getting care. We have people in the Northwest that are saying it's taking them 7 and 8 and 9 months to get started with services, when they have a physician's order that says they need assistance with activities of daily living. I have people telling me in West Virginia that their West Virginia group has said they're not going to add anybody till somebody comes off of service. They've capped out the number of veterans they're going to help.
Well, hopefully this act, the Elizabeth Dole Act, eliminates that and they start holding true to what they say, right?
Right. Then but it still becomes our pressure back to you and I and to the people that might be listening to this call to genuinely step outside to the people in our community and say, hey guys, we need to do a better job of helping with these services and providing them on a national level. And look how underserved we are. How many people are in neighborhoods at pieces and parts? When I start looking at communities and I pull numbers up out of the VA, and you've got 10 million plus over the age of 65, and then you're going, but how come none of them are getting, how come less than 2% of the 65 plus population are getting care? Even if I look at,
it's crazy.
If I went, even if I go to the VA system, so I'll give you a number. If I looked at the veteran population over the age of 85 in this country that's actually listed in the VA system, we're providing care. There's 1.355 million veterans
over the age of 85.
Over the age of 85 listen to the VA system, and we're only providing care to 173,000.
That's 10% ish. A little over.
Yeah, but I mean, that was even if we were looking at the over 85 population within this country that's listed in the system. So we're not even at 10% of the 85-year-old population, much less the population that's across the country that have disabilities and issues and problems that need medical care on a daily basis.
And I can attest, a lot of the veterans that we took care of when I was running my agency were under 85. I'll never forget, I had a quadriplegic. He was like 61 years old.
I would use the example. I actually had and I use West Virginia because I get a little irritated when I think about one of the clients. I had a provider reach out to me probably midsummer and said, what can I do? I have a veteran that's literally crawling out of his bed and crawling around his house because he doesn't have the ability to get into a wheelchair, and they're giving him 9 hours of service a week as he crawls around his house.
I know, it's sad.
So we did a thorough assessment, and we did some outreach, and we did some outreach to some local back into the hospital and back into patient advocacy, and we talked because he didn't have family to advocate on his behalf, and we did some advocacy on his behalf, and he got a significant increase in hours because he genuinely needed them, and we were able to assist in understanding how to do that. But the point is, these people are out there across this country all over the place, and just aren't aware of the fact that this is a benefit that's available to and eligible to veterans across our country.
Well, I'm glad you're sharing that. I say awesome because I'm glad that they're doing something about it, hopefully, right? But we got a long ways to go, it seems. So that's I want to take this because we got 5 topics and we're still on topic 1, but this is a good topic. Where do you see this in 5 years now with this act and new presidential administration and the focus on it and the budgets? Where do you see it? Greg's crystal ball.
I actually see it becoming more of a standard practice. I see it with more standardized hours, and I see increases coming back into this environment. And I would use the example of, oh look, they're only going to authorize, and I'm going to throw a number out there. They're only going to authorize 16 hours of care a week. Say that's what they said, and say that's what the VA benefit was. Then standardize that and create it across the entire country and say that's what I'm giving. But right now, there's no standardization to it. There's no consistency to it, and they're not doing it at a level to actually meet the client's needs. It's all budget related. I genuinely believe with the changes in law, codifying this into law, with the changes in mandate to standardization, and with the standard of the mandate for funding and the percentage change, I genuinely see this over the next 4 years drastically increasing in numbers and consistency.
Well, that's great. And as providers, it's good to hear. But as, kind of the humanitarian piece is there's a lot of them that need the help. And hopefully that access continues to grow in numbers across the United States. But for us agencies too, I'll close this one out with this. You have to advocate for veterans. You have to talk to the veterans patient advocates. Those are very good people to talk to when you're working with someone who may not be enrolled. That's one thing I'll have you validate here is one question I always get, because, like my wife's uncle, for example, he has a primary care physician. He called me a couple weeks ago and he said, how do I get care through the VA? And I was like, hey, I'm not going to use his name, but are you enrolled at the VA health system? Do you have the physician through the VA? He said, no. And I said, all right, well, you're going to have to go see a doctor and get enrolled first, right? And I got him with the patient advocate to make that happen. And he was like, well, Dustin, does that mean I have to drop my primary care physician? What's the answer to that, Greg?
So absolutely do not have to address that. And I apologize, my camera's a little blurry for some reason there for a minute. It's coming back. There we go. So they absolutely do not have to change their primary care physician. They absolutely do not have to change their insurance. If they have Medicare, if they have Blue Cross or Blue Shield or whatever it might be, they can continue with the same physician they've had forever and ever and ever. The only difference is they have to enroll in the VA's health system and be seen by a VA primary care physician to evaluate the fact that they have activities of daily living needs, at which point in time an authorization can be created. And, even going along the lines of that, in the past, it was so hard to enroll. We used to battle with enrollment. Enrollment was a challenge. We'd get a copy of their DD, you'd have to chase down their DD 214. You'd have to chase down their financial requirements. You'd have to fill out a 1010 easy form, and you have to put all this information together. Then you have to send this over to the VA, and you're waiting for someone on the other end to look at the multi-page document to make sure you checked every box and that you met the criteria and you met the standards, and then they would send you notice, and then you had to make an appointment with the VA hospital to see a doctor. It became so bureaucratic that veterans stopped and walked away from it. But the reality is the veteran can enroll over the phone in a half-an-hour phone call, do their entire enrollment, and not have to search out all those documents, and actually set up an appointment while they're on with phone to be seen by a VA physician to get enrolled in network in one phone call.
Yep. All right. Well, I just wanted
to. The process is streamlined, and they do not have to change anything they're doing. They're only seeing the VA to accomplish being enrolled in their health system for benefits.
Yep. So hopefully I got this recorded, and our franchise owners and anyone doing home care that are watching this, that maybe independent agencies or other franchise system agencies, I'm sure they all get that question, because I talk to a lot of veterans and they're like, I don't want to switch my primary care physician. And it's really hard for them to trust a stranger like myself for the first meeting and the first time to say, that's not the case. And it kind of deters them from even making the call. So have them make that phone call, do that 30-minute call, and let them get the education they need from the VA directly. And that's how agencies can start getting more and more people on the services. I'm going to shift gears though, because we have 4 more topics and we got 32 minutes. I want to go over to Medicaid 80-20 rule. Man, what a ride that's been. My position on Medicaid 80-20, coming up with the new administration, it was coming up. I'm like, I'm not going to pay too much attention to this. I'll let the big franchises pay attention and spend all the legal fees to try to figure this out, and I'll just learn from them. In addition, what else just happened is that with the new administration, a lot of people remember that. Did you see that rule where minimum salary for non-exempt employees went from like $42,000 to $58,000 a year? That just got kiboshed instantly out of the state of Texas. What's happened to the 80-20 rule, Greg? And how do you see that? How do you see that going over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we saw a massive debate around the 80-20 rule within the House and with the Senate conversations that were right down party lines, where they're saying, oh, we need to pay this back into the system. It's all about paying the caregivers. These people are making too much money. The plan was actually put out to be enacted over the next 6-year period. I genuinely felt like there was going to be a massive opportunity we already had states going to file appeals to not allow for it. I think it will absolutely get tossed in the trash with new administration, but we still have to advocate. We still have to be out in front of congressional leaders to explain why this is not a realistic thought process for, with the reimbursement levels the way they are, and with the services the way they are across this country, we cannot operate on an 80-20 platform for Medicaid. It's not realistic. And I genuinely believe that we've seen enough pushback from our congressional leaders. I genuinely see it by changing administrations, this is immediately going to get squashed. If not, but again, I think it's something we need to continue to advocate back to our congressional leaders under the current administration to make sure that they squash this and don't let the bureaucratic group within the government dictate those levels for us, because it wasn't something that was passed congressionally. It wasn't something that was put in law. It was just put together by CMS, which is an agency which doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And so as an agency, this is a little hypocrisy of what I just said. I'm going to let the other guys do the work. But now that I'm going to go on the other side here and say, there's government bodies that are, there's lobbyist bodies that you can join. You got NAC, you got HCAOA. If you're an agency watching this, and I tell our franchise owners all the time, actually, we invest in a membership for all of our owners when they come on board because we feel it's that important. I'll never forget the most beneficial. Remember when were you around when the caregiver exemption law passed?
Oh, absolutely.
Overtime?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the big talk. I think it was 2012 or something like that. I literally got involved with it, went to DC, met with senators, congressmen of our district in Nebraska, talked to them for hours. It was actually, lobbying is just one giant sales pitch, and you hope they're listening when you're talking to them. Right. But the more people you can get involved, the more voice that we have. So my advice to home care agencies, how many home care agencies, Greg, if I were to ask you, are around the United States?
I think there's around 25,000, give or take a little bit.
25,000 owners. That's 25,000 people, right? And caregivers, which if you said, let's say average agency has 20 to 30 caregivers, hundreds of thousands of individuals can go and advocate and be in part of that conversation. The biggest piece of advice I can give on any government decisions, right? Like in the state of Nebraska, now again, take a step back here. Anytime someone comes up, they came in to talk about Medicaid rates, and they're sitting there saying what agencies do. The people that are on those boards making those decisions, they don't do what we do. They have no idea what we do. They look at data, and data isn't always the story, right? Data gives you a good ballpark, but it doesn't give you the actual need and the impacts and the outcomes our services can have. So again, this is me advocating to all agencies out there, get involved with NAC. Get involved with Paradigm. I talk to Greg and Yessie all the time about, hey, I want to talk to the VA leadership. Get me on the phone with them, right? Like, get involved, talk to your congressmen and women across the United States, and be a part of this conversation. If we don't, then we're relying on people with minimal experience. Maybe there's people who come from the healthcare space or on that board, on that decision-making process. But for the most part, they're just going to go off data and what they're being told and what they're being given, and they're going to make decisions on that unless you guys are giving them the story. So that's my little push there. Well, that was a quick one, 80-20. Let's stay on that one really quick. You know, a lot of people are fearful to go on Medicaid, especially states like Texas, right? Horrible rates. I've talked to you before. I've had you speak at convention, and you talked about like family caregiver programs and, you know, think of the dollar amounts and all that. What would your advice be to agencies that are in low reimbursement? I know what my advice would be. I want to hear yours, and then I'll kind of either agree or kind of question it. What would your advice be to those people in Texas when it comes to Medicaid participation?
Yeah. I would actually use the same analogy for every single state. And here's what I would tell you. You know, I'm going to use the VA as an example real quick, because 5 years ago, I was running around with my hair on fire telling every single person that would listen to me to enroll in the community care network, to get enrolled in the VA, and to get enrolled so you could be providing services as this got streamlined and billing was better and rates were good, and on a national average, the rates are fantastic. What happened? The network filled up. Areas became saturated. Rates were good. Now you can't get in and get started with network. Now, we turn this around and we go back over to Medicaid. Medicaid, as a payer on a national level, if I just look at the budget for Medicaid in long-term supportive services, LTSS, It's a $3.4 trillion budget in the United States. 32% of that 3.4 trillion is in for adult hourly personal care and waiver programs across the country. So when you look at that number, it's almost $1 trillion. It's right at $1 trillion. And if you look at what's out in the budget piece, they're talking about an extra 15 billion being tossed into that market, annualized over the next 10 years that's already being budgeted for to increase hourly services and care to keep people home and independent in waiver and state Medicaid programs. It's already budgeted out in the annualized budget. So you figure they're going to add another 150 billion into $1 trillion over the next that's already targeted and budgeted out. So it's going to do nothing but increase. It's not going to shrink. Okay. With that being said, Texas reimbursement at $15 an hour. Utilizing a family caregiver, right? Your payment to the family caregiver is significantly low than we typically pay for private duty and other payer sources. It's just because of the reimbursement, we have to maintain a margin, to at least a working margin. So I would say typically my gross profit on a Medicaid client in Texas is only about $5 an hour. Okay. But my average hours per week are over 40. So that's still a $200 a week client. If I took that same number and I threw it over at a private duty client, my gross profit's closer to $10 an hour. It's double. But the average hours per client are only 20. So in reality, that same client, now I'm not talking about the administrative costs and the back end costs. I mean, we could talk about how all those things measure up, but in reality, that Medicaid client is worth just as much, $200 per week, as that private pay client. And at the end of the day, my Medicaid clients last an average life cycle on a Medicaid client's 5 years. My life cycle on a private pay client is 8 months. So if the same client's going to stick around for 5 years and get me the same amount of gross profit, and if I move away from just gross margin thought processes, because if I'm trying to work off of the classic thought process, if I have to have 50% gross margin on everything I do, Medicaid is not ever going to add up to that number. But I have a provider here in Pennsylvania that I have worked with for years. He does 6,000 hours a week of benefits. His entire platform is Medicaid. And his margins are in the mid 30s. But
terrible.
if you were, it's terrible. But
I said it's not that bad.
But his entire workforce is family caregiver driven. So and he literally is doing 6,000 hours with 3 staff.
Yeah, I was going to say that the benefit of the family caregiver program, it should be low maintenance, right?
It is.
Like what I always tell agencies and our owners, if you do the family caregiver program and you're placing people, like if their family member has to go out of town, I mean, they're going to have part of their Medicaid contracts with the senior, the person on Medicaid, is they have to provide an alternative. Usually they agree that we'll find alternative means of care. So you as the agency, if that family caregiver is gone, you can make one of two decisions. A, you place someone there that's being paid higher and you're eating it for that week, or B, that it's on them to find a replacement during that time. It's kind of like to me on the private duty side, to compare it, it's like live-ins. Live-ins should be a very low maintenance, right? You can get a live-in late rate, that's fine, but they're there for 4 days. I don't want to hear from them. That's part of the deal. They're in that house the entire time. But if you're getting constant calls and instances are happening, that's when you say you need to go to 24/7 care. This is not a live-in situation. Kind of the same thing. Like if that family member is saying, I'm not going to my mom or my dad, then hey, listen, this isn't working. I can't put someone else there other than that family caregiver.
That's correct.
Right? And so as long as you're administratively, and I'll give a plug to right now real quick to a good provider of ours. When you think administrative, there's a lot of new companies nowadays that can help you on the administrative side. You can go with a company like Solvo, which is a virtual assistant company out of Colombia. Very affordable people who are really good at their jobs, who are really good at care coordination and care recruiting. That's a very low cost administrative person that you can say, hey, I need you to manage all my Medicaid, right? And it's a very low overhead on the interior side. So and the biggest thing that you said that I want to agree with you on this too is that the VA, you hit the nail on the head. I just got an email today, Greg, actually from Rachel at Optum. And I said, I need to check on Virginia, Florida, Maryland, and there's one other one. There's another state in there I can't remember, but she said, looking in those counties, those are big metropolitan areas. They're probably not a need and they're saturated. I'm looking for more rural. So what happens now is these new providers who waited to get on there, they've lost it, right? Now, I'm not going to stop fighting to get those providers on, right? But it's not easy to get approved anymore unless you're willing to go out into the middle of nowhere. If you can go to the rural, you can get that contract, right? So that's my same opinion with Medicaid is, yeah, the rates today, and you just validated it. That's why I wanted you to go first, because people think you're smarter than I am, and you probably are, right?
That's not true.
But if you wait too long and then all of a sudden there's a shift in those rates and they say this budget's going to this, and all of a sudden, let's say Texas goes from 14 to 21, right? Not a major, but it goes to 21. That's a $7 increase. Texas Medicaid enrollment system will be flooded with providers instantly. I'll never forget Nebraska. Nebraska went, I'll say this, and if someone watches this, they're like, I need to go to Nebraska and start an agency. Nebraska is over $30 an hour in Medicaid. Right. There's Tennessee, I believe, is upper 20s, low 30s. Well, South Dakota is mid 30s.
And Oregon and Washington are in the 40s.
Yeah. And guess what? They're flooded.
They're flooded. Indiana is a classic example. A year ago, Indiana was doing $16.25 an hour for Medicaid. They got an $11 increase. $11. Well, guess what happened when they went up $11? Everybody and their brother on the planet wants to now be a provider. Guess what happens? They say, we don't need any more providers in our network. We're filled. Pennsylvania, same thing. Rates went from, 16, 17 bucks an hour to 26 bucks an hour. People are like, I'm liking 26 bucks an hour for my $13 caregiver. It's a 50% margin. I'll go do it. And then you've got managed care networks. So like, yeah, I got 28 people in your area. I don't need anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And the biggest thing is here, you got to diversify. If you're a home care agency and you're just depending on private pay, you're going to get left behind.
But the thing about, with that being said, there's so many ways to diversify into third-party payers. There is the VA, there's Medicaid, there's workman's comp, there's long-term care insurance, there's Medicare Advantage. We could go through over and over again, but what does, if you go to Activated Insights or Home Care Pulse, as it used to be called, and so on, and you start looking at, what's happened annually year over year, what do we see? We see that private duty hours are down significantly. Not necessarily the number of people getting care, but how many hours per week, because financially people are squeezed a little bit more as our economy is not quite as strong. The guy that was getting 40 hours is getting 26, or he's getting 32. Actually, it's about a 4.3% decrease, according to them, annualized across the country. So if they've dropped 24%, how are you going to diversify? You got to figure out other ways to incorporate payers and consistency into your platform to grow and for longevity and for competitive advantage. The other thing is, if I walk out into the community to work with a case manager, social workers, people in the community, and the only thing I'm doing is private pay, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, go ahead. But if Dustin, if you walk in and you say, look, I can do your private pay and your Medicaid and your workman's comp and your VA and your Medicare Advantage and everything else, if you've got a client, I can take them. And Greg walks in and says, I want everybody that can afford to pay $40 an hour. What does that do for my competitive advantage?
Exactly. I mean, it sets you apart, right? Because what a case manager, even the VA case managers, I remember if you tell that case manager at the VA no, they're like, I'm not working with them anymore. You got to tell them yes all the time. You know, you got to get if you do that, if you're the yes person to the VA case managers, I see so many agencies get so mad. They're like, I'm not getting any leads. It's because there's relationships already established there. Now I know they're working on that. Optum and TriWest is really trying to say you need to spread the love, and I agree with it. But you also can't pick and choose the vet you're going to take. You're going to have to take them. And actually, I'll give some coaching advice to agencies here. The first call I make that I actually talk to one of those case managers, it's hard to talk to them. I open up with, tell me who your revolving doors are. Let's start there. What veterans do you have that are a pain in your rear that have been through 6 agencies? Now it's going to suck because that's a red flag, right? But you just made that person's life easy. You're telling me you want my hard ones? Yeah, send them. They might give them to you, might service them for 2 months, and then they go to agency number 9. However, you've just established a relationship that way, right? So I would say you got to be able to say yes. You got to, from the VA side, even Medicaid, same thing. There's Medicaid ones that are, woof, man, I've dealt with them. But as long as you're saying yes and you're making those case managers easy and you're accepting them, you'll get leads out of there. So I'm going to shift.
If every one of your private pay clients is easy, I want to know where you're running an agency.
No, those are worse. Honestly, I think the seniors, we can talk about that for another 20 minutes. I think the seniors of private pay, for the most part, aren't too bad. It's the family members of the private pay that drive you nuts. Yep. So it's, yeah. All right. That's a whole different coach's corner, Greg. I'll have it back. We can share stories. All right. We have a couple more topics. I don't know if we're going to have a lot of time. So I'm going to focus on Medicare Advantage plan. You mentioned those. I haven't had a single agency really go after a Medicare Advantage plan. What are you seeing with agencies and Medicare Advantage plans, and where do you see Medicare Advantage 5 years from now?
So if you look at what the projections around Medicare Advantage and where it's going and what's happening with it, I've seen projections by 2028 that 95% of our entire Medicare population in this country will be moved under managed. So I've seen several studies that show that. So do I know that to be a true and absolute fact? Right now, it's a much smaller piece of our Medicare population overall, but I genuinely believe it's moving over. Medicare for seniors is still very expensive because everything's a 20% copay, whether you go to the hospital, whether you go to your doctor, whether you're taking medications. Under standard Medicare, you've got a 20% copay. Well, my 87-year-old mother can't afford a 20% copay at the hospital. If she goes in for a surgery, she has to come up with 20% on her Medicare. Or she has to have a supplemental plan she's buying or whatever else. When she moves over to managed Medicare, she doesn't have copays anymore. It's 100% cost coverage as long as she's within network. So they have massive advantage within the Medicare Advantage programs. In spite of that, Humana, for instance, put out an article in January that said short stay and rehospitalizations are going to bankrupt their Medicare Advantage platforms. So they're investing in home care plans and other opportunities to help to manage rehospitalizations and quick stays by having longer term. So they're increasing and they're creating these programs. It's in-home supportive care. And so one of the things I want to tell everybody when you're looking at plans and you're looking to be interested in Medicare Advantage, you're not trying to enroll in home care or home health. You're wanting to enroll in as a program providing support for in-home supportive care, because that's the private duty, private pay piece of this that's allowed. So under CMS rules with a Medicare Advantage plan, a client doesn't have to have a skilled need to have home care help. So they don't have to have a nurse in the home or a PT in the home or skilled nursing going on. They can actually just write an order for personal care services to maintain independence and keep that client at home within Medicare Advantage plans as part of CMS. So what does that do? We're only seeing 120 to 160 hours annualized, and it's always done post-procedure or post-hospitalization to help that transitional period into home. But I have a provider out of the Houston area that had 53, 54 admissions last year under Medicare Advantage, and they converted 50% of those people to private pay. I have a group of 4 in Minnesota that contracted with a Humana plan, they had 127 admissions last year under Medicare Advantage, and they converted 67% to private pay. So the opportunity, if I get Susie, the most amazing caregiver in the whole wide world, into your home for 3 weeks,
Sure.
You're not going to want to get rid of her. You're going to want to keep her. So the advantage is I can actually be providing that first period of time for free. I can get them in, and there's no cost to the client. Also, when you're talking to someone in the hospital and they're wanting to rotate this person back into home care, if they can get free services and care to get them discharged into home and get them transitioned to home, it's easier to get them out of the hospital.
Yeah.
So being enrolled in the plans now allows me to have that extra little feather in my cap, per se, when I'm talking to referral sources, acute rehabs, hospitals, skilled home, all those kind of things, because I can be a part of that plan to increase in-home supportive services, to maintain independence, and then possibly convert over to private pay. And the reality is, even if I only have them for 3 to 4 weeks, but I'm back into the hospital, I'm back into the community, the world all knows that I'm providing care, it's now embedding me more into the community than not taking these people and bringing them home.
Well, and then also to advocate for the industry, if you collect that data like WellSky, our platform has that care insights and also the hospitalization tracking that they do. If you can start building that data from those discharges that come under your service, and what you're saying, Greg, just to recap so people listening understand it, these Medicare Advantage plans are like post-discharge usually cover 3 to 4 weeks. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. So if you can show in that 3 to 4 weeks, and let's say you got 55 discharges, right? And you have a four readmit within 30 days. I don't know the penalties and all that, but I know it's millions of dollars of penalties for under 30-day readmissions if you're above a threshold. If you could show that you have a less than 10% readmission rate out of those 55 people, that's 50 people that you've kept out of the hospital. And I guarantee you, if you can show hospitals and insurance companies and Medicare, if Humana's, the Kaisers, the Blue Cross Blue Shield, all of them, whoever does them, that data, they're going to say, oh my God, you saved us. Let's not everyone's going to go back, but let's say you've increased it from 15 people going back to 5. What's an average daily hospital stay? What, 20 grand, I think, something like that, 20 grand. That's $200,000 saved on that 10 people person saving right there. And if you can show on that gives them more clout to say, put more money into home care now, right? Because look at what they're doing. But the issue with our agencies right now, and this is a big push of ours, is we don't have that data. We know what we want. We know that we do have impacts. We have to measure those impacts and then show our outcomes to those MCOs and those decision makers. That's how we're going to continue to evolve it. We're going to go on to the next topic here. To close this out, though, where do you see Medicare Advantage plans in 5 years?
I actually see them growing, because I think the Medicare Advantage platform is going to go to a much bigger percentage of our Medicare population on a nationalized level. And I think I genuinely think we're going to see data collected by people intelligent like yourselves over time to show the true benefit of home care benefits. And I think that if we can do that, and we can pull together as an industry to show the genuine impact of home care in rehospitalizations, short stay, that we have a massive impact. I think we'll see even more plans. I think there's 867 plans in the United States today that offer in-home supportive services for Medicare Advantage. If you go back 3 years, there were 142.
42. Okay. So yeah, it's evolving.
So in 3 years, we've gone from 142 plans to just short of 1,000.
Yeah. So it's evolving, and so do home care agencies. So I want to take a pause here before we go on to my last topic, my closing topics, which is titled Greg's Crystal Ball. But before I do that, can you explain Paradigm? How does Paradigm help people with VA credentialing? Do they do Medicaid waiver credentialing and Medicare Advantage plans? Is that a service that you offer home care agencies out there?
So we are able to assist with the entire enrollment process for the VA. We can also show them where they can and can't potentially get into networks, what might be saturated, what's not saturated, so we can assist them with their enrollment in the VA system. From a Medicaid standpoint, we have a number of states that we actually are able to do enrollment and actually do the enrollment with them and for them and assist them right through it. And then we have a number of states where we can be there for a support mechanism just to show them what they need, how they need, what they need to do within Medicaid. And we also have a built-in platform in our system now that can show them what the rates are, what the programs are on our website, where they can actually go in and see what's going on in my state. And they can see a full breakdown of what the opportunities might be within the waiver and the PEACE programs. Our education department has built out around Medicare Advantage what it is, why it is, and then how to actually step-by-step do the enrollments and what it might be. So we can show you that from a support mechanism through Paradigm as well.
And I know we actually just did our first one out in California. We got on our first Humana plan out in California. So testing it out there with our franchise owner, Cheryl. So, all right, last topic with 4 minutes, Greg's crystal ball. Let's see here. Out of the 3 third-party pairs we've discussed, where should agencies in your mind focus the most? Which is evolving the fastest and looks most promising in the future?
I think the VA is going to stabilize, and I would do everything I can and make every single opportunity that I can to get into network and be a network provider for the VA. I think the largest opportunity there is in just sheer numbers, volume, and across this country is within the Medicaid platform. It's a massively underserved population that has a constant need, a continual turnover of clients, a continual addition to clients, and I don't see those programs shrinking. I see them doing nothing but growing. It's even budgeted in for them to grow. So first and foremost, everyone should try to enroll in all of them. So if you said, what's your crystal ball, Greg? I think you should be in every single program, piece, and part that you can enroll, whether you're making it 3% or 5% of your business plan or 1% of your business plan. If you're not enrolled tomorrow and things change, you're getting left behind. So I would tell you every single opportunity with third-party payers that you can enroll in, you should be getting in and be a part of, so you have that opportunity to expand in the future into the industry.
900% agree. It's a big push of ours. I hope our franchise owners are watching this. It's scary. It's time consuming. It is. Medicaid enrollment takes time. In Illinois, I think we've been doing it for 8 months at one location. But once you get through, you're above everybody else for when things evolve over the next decade, let's say, that you're already there. And if that flood comes, when that reimbursement rate goes up by $6 or $7 in the state that you're in, you're not going to get stuck in line. That's the biggest thing for me is do it. You don't have to take everybody, right? But you can be, I always say 60-40, 60% private pay, 40% other third-party payers. VA is a very good reimbursement, so 40% VA is great. It's dangerous, I will say, just to give us, quick last 2 minutes here. It is dangerous to do like 90% to 100% third-party payers because you just never know when things get cut, budget gets cut. What happened in February with Change Healthcare, reimbursement stopped for like 30 days. If you don't have the cash flow to support that, it's really, it can hurt you. So definitely want to have that good mix, but I would say 60-40 is my recommended ratio there. So Greg, I appreciate your time as always, and always loving talking to you. You're a wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate all Paradigm does for our owners and does for the home care industry as a whole.
Well, and when you run into those blips or fears, or you're running around scared that you're not going to get reimbursed timely and you're not going to be able to do the billing, or you're going to struggle with any of these third-party payers, that's when you can reach out to those of us at Paradigm, and we can actually relieve you of that billing burden and not have those fears and make sure you get paid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we love the partnership. I think all of our owners that are on VA use you guys. So it's great. It's a good partnership. And thanks for joining, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Talk to you later.
Yep.
You too. Bye.